Hey, future civil servants. You know, if you're getting ready for those UPSC exams, this deep dive is for you.
Absolutely.
Today, we're going to tackle something pretty important.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be a hot button issue on both the prelims and the mains.
I think so.
The Immigration and Foreigners Bill of 2025.
It's really interesting how this bill is like a total game changer.
It is a big deal.
It is a big deal, yeah.
I mean, we're talking about replacing laws that have been around since the British Raj.
Mm-hmm.
The Passport Entry into India Act
Right.
is from 1920.
Wow.
Then you've got the Registration of Foreigners Act of 1939,
Mm-hmm.
the Foreigners Act of 1946,
Yeah.
even the Immigration Carriers Liability Act
Oh, wow.
of 2000.
Yeah, these older laws really aren't made for how the world works today.
No.
With globalization and everything. It's like...
It's like we're trying to run a 21st century computer
Exact.
on like Windows 95.
Yeah, or even older.
Right.
Like a DOS system.
Yeah. So in steps, this Immigration and Foreigners Bill of 2025 trying to bring India into the modern age when it comes to immigration.
Absolutely.
The source for this deep dive is a great article from the Indian Express.
Good source.
Really recommend it for all of you out there that are
Mhm.
studying for the UPSC exams.
Yeah.
Now, one of the biggest things that pops out to me when I look at this bill
Yeah.
are these really hefty fines for violations.
Yeah. 5 lakhs for unauthorized entry.
5 lakhs for unauthorized entry.
10 lakhs for a fake passport.
10 lakhs.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the government is serious.
Yeah.
They want to deter people from breaking these laws.
They want to make it clear
Yeah.
that it's not going to be tolerated.
Absolutely.
And it's not just individuals, right?
Right.
We're talking about institutions,
Mm.
universities.
Hospitals.
They're all going to have to step up their game
Yeah.
when it comes to tracking and reporting foreign students and patients.
Mm.
I can imagine that's going to be a lot of paperwork.
Absolutely. It's about being transparent and accountable,
Yeah.
Really knowing who's in the country, why they're here, how long they're staying.
With everything that's going on in the world.
Absolutely. Security is a big deal.
Yeah. Terrorism, transnational crime.
Yeah,
It's a very different world than it was back in 1920.
it is, for sure.
And of course, the bill also deals with visas and passports.
Yeah.
But kind of-
Stricter requirements, background checks, more scrutiny overall.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a lot harder to get into India.
If you don't have everything in order.
Especially if you're trying to pull something funny.
Yeah, it's a more proactive strategy to immigration now.
That's interesting.
Managing the flow of people before problems come up.
Yeah.
It's about control and thinking ahead.
It sounds like they're trying to strike a balance
Yeah.
between facilitating legitimate travel
Hmm.
and exchange,
Right.
but also really tightening up those security measures.
Absolutely. Finding that balance is key.
Yeah. And to help with that,
Yeah.
the bill gives immigration officers a lot more authority.
That's...
They're going to be able to detain and investigate people,
Yeah.
control the movements of foreigners who might be a security risk.
Mm-hmm.
They can even deny people entry at the border.
If they think it's necessary.
Wow.
It's important, though,
Yeah.
to make sure this power isn't misused.
That was going to be the next question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there enough safeguards in place
Right.
to prevent overreach?
Right.
It's something we can look into later.
Yeah. Lot to unpack
There's
here.
a lot of layers to this bill.
Definitely.
So many things for our listeners to think about if they're preparing for those UPSC exams.
Absolutely.
But before we get into the challenges and potential problems,
Yeah.
there's one more player we have to talk about.
Okay, who's that?
The airlines and transport companies.
Oh, yeah. They're really on the front lines now
They are,
in enforcing these immigration policies.
because they're the ones bringing people into the country.
Exactly. They have to verify everyone's documents.
No more looking the other way.
If there's a suspicious passport
Nope.
or a questionable visa,
They'll be held accountable.
yeah, or they could face big consequences.
Big time.
So this is really highlighting that global aspect of immigration.
It is.
We can't just think about what's happening inside India.
Right.
We have to work with other countries, too, to
Yeah.
make sure the system is secure and organized.
It's a global effort.
Okay, so let's recap.
Yeah.
We've got tougher penalties, more responsibility for universities and hospitals,
Mm-hmm.
a total overhaul of the visa and passport system,
Right?
more power for immigration officers,
Yeah.
and a big focus on working with other countries.
It's comprehensive.
This bill really is comprehensive.
No wonder it's sparking so much debate.
Yeah, so many people are talking about it.
Yeah. For those of you listening who are prepping for the UPSC exams, think about the potential questions.
Well, this is a gold mine.
Yeah. How will this bill impact India's relationships with other countries?
What about the economic consequences? There are so many angles to think about.
Absolutely.
But before we get lost in all the possibilities, let's step back
Okay.
and think about some of the challenges
Right.
and criticisms,
Both sides of the coin.
because there are definitely some concerns.
There are.
And I think our listeners will find this next part really helpful as they start to form their own opinions.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Let's do it. All right, so we've got this framework of the new Immigration and Foreigners Bill. But, like with any big policy change, there are always concerns and potential challenges.
Right, and this is where things get really interesting, especially if you're studying for the UPSC mains exam.
Yes,
Yeah,
because you have to show that you understand all these different issues.
exactly. One big concern that people are raising is about how this bill might affect human rights.
Yeah, particularly for people who have been living in India for a long time.
Right, like long-term foreign residents.
And also asylum seekers.
Right, those seeking refuge.
This is something that a lot of legal experts and advocacy groups have been talking about.
What are their specific concerns, though?
Yeah. And how does the bill try to address them?
So imagine you've been living in India for years,
Yeah.
built a life here, maybe even have a family,
Right.
but suddenly you could be deported because of a small problem with your paperwork.
That would be so disruptive.
It would be really unsettling.
What about people who are fleeing persecution in their home countries?
That's the key question.
Are they going to get caught up in these stricter rules?
Critics are saying the bill doesn't really differentiate between people who are migrating for economic reasons
Right.
and those who are truly seeking refuge.
So there's a worry that security concerns might overshadow humanitarian needs.
Exactly.
So how does the bill actually handle deportations?
Well, it does outline a process,
Okay.
but some people say it's not very transparent.
Right.
There are no clear guidelines.
So you're saying people might get deported without a lawyer?
It's possible or without a chance to appeal their case.
So it brings up that classic debate
Yeah.
between national security and individual rights.
A theme that comes up a lot in those UPSC mains exams.
It does. What other challenges do you see with this bill?
Well, another hurdle could be the burden it puts on institutions like universities and hospitals.
Right, because now they have to keep track of and report on every foreign student or patient.
Exactly. Can you imagine the paperwork?
It would be a nightmare.
Verifying all those documents from different countries.
Making sure you meet all those deadlines.
And what if you make a mistake?
It could be a real problem.
It's a lot of pressure.
And there's a worry that all this bureaucracy could actually get in the way of these institutions doing their jobs.
Exactly. Universities need international students.
To bring in different perspectives.
Right, for diversity and academic exchange.
In hospitals, they treat patients from all over the world.
Especially for those specialized procedures.
So if they can't keep up with all these new rules,
it could really affect their work.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the practical challenges of actually implementing a law this big.
Especially in a country like India.
It's huge.
So many different levels of government.
Different agencies. A massive bureaucracy.
It's a huge job.
So how do you make sure it all works?
Well, you need really clear communication.
Right?
You have to train all those immigration officers, and you need good systems and technology to handle all that extra work.
And don't forget about money.
Yes, resources are essential.
How is the government going to measure if this bill is successful?
That's a great question, and it's one that's super relevant for the UPSC.
Will it just be about reducing the number of people who enter the country illegally?
Or deporting more people.
Or are they also going to look at how it affects human rights?
Right.
And the economy and India's image in the world?
It's complex.
So we have to think about both the good and the bad that might come from this bill.
Both the intended and unintended consequences.
Now let's zoom out a bit.
Okay.
How does this bill fit in with what's happening in the rest of the world?
You mean with migration trends?
Yeah, a lot of countries are becoming more anti-immigration.
Yeah.
Is India doing the same thing?
It's an interesting point. We can't just look at this bill from an Indian perspective.
Right.
We have to think about how it fits into global trends.
We're living in a time where people are moving around more than ever before.
They are for many reasons.
Economic opportunity, conflict, climate change.
It's a global phenomenon.
And India is becoming a popular destination.
With its growing economy and young population.
Exactly.
So this bill could be seen as India's way of saying,
we're in control.
Right, we decide who comes in, who stays, and under what conditions.
It's about defining India's place in this globalized world.
Setting its own immigration policy.
But how will all these new rules affect India's economy?
That's a great question.
The government talks a lot about attracting foreign investment.
Right.
And encouraging innovation.
But could this bill actually get in the way of that?
Some people think so. They say that stricter visa rules and more scrutiny could scare away investors.
And make it harder for companies to hire talented people from other countries.
Right. They worry that India might seem less welcoming.
Yeah, like it's closing its doors.
But couldn't you argue that by cracking down on illegal immigration
Yeah,
and making the system more organized,
right.
that the government is making things more stable and predictable for businesses?
Absolutely. That's a good point.
So is that a point in favor of the bill?
It could be. The government thinks that by making things clearer
Yeah.
and making sure everyone follows the rules.
It will actually make India more attractive for investment and innovation
Right. It's about leveling the playing field
and making things fair.
and transparent.
So there are definitely different opinions on how this bill might affect the economy.
It's complicated.
There's a lot to think about.
This is why it's so important to look at all sides of the issue.
And to really understand the details.
That's what makes a good UPSC aspirant.
Someone who can think critically
Analyze the information.
and present a well-rounded argument.
Exactly. This bill is the perfect example of a topic that needs that kind of thinking.
Now let's talk specifically about your UPSC preparation.
Okay.
We talked about the potential essay questions on the mains exam,
Yeah.
but let's get really specific.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine you're sitting in that exam hall
Yeah.
and you see this question. To what extent is the Immigration and Foreigners Bill 2025 a response to the challenges of globalization?
Okay.
Analyze its potential implications for India's economic and geopolitical interests.
Wow, that's a great question.
They're not just asking you to summarize the bill.
Right.
They want you to connect it to bigger ideas.
Exactly.
To analyze the reasons behind
With
it.
root causes.
And to think about the long-term
It
consequences.
was about the big picture.
Here's another one.
Okay.
Discuss the ethical and human rights dimensions of the Immigration and Foreigners Bill 2025.
Oh.
How does it balance the need for security with the rights of individuals, including migrants and asylum seekers?
Another great question.
This one makes you think about the moral and ethical issues.
Right. Which are a part of any immigration policy.
You have to acknowledge that it's complicated.
Yeah.
You have to consider different points of view.
And then make a balanced and well-reasoned argument.
Okay, so UPSC gurus in the making.
Yes.
Let's change gears again
Okay.
and talk about some specific examples
Okay.
of how this bill might actually work in real life.
Yeah, we've talked about the what and the why.
Now let's talk about the how.
Bring it to life.
So let's say you're a university administrator
Okay.
and you have to deal with all these new requirements for foreign students,
Can you imagine?
all those applications,
Yeah.
documents from all over the world,
Making sure everything is verified.
deadlines to meet.
And the consequences if you make even a small mistake.
That's a lot of pressure
It adds a whole new level of complexity.
to an already difficult job.
Absolutely. And that's just one example.
Think about hospitals that treat patients from other countries
Yeah, medical tourism is a big deal.
and businesses that want to hire people from overseas.
It's getting harder and harder.
And what about NGOs who work with refugees?
They'll be affected too.
This bill is going to have real-world consequences.
It will.
And if you want to work in the Indian civil services,
You need to understand those consequences.
you have to understand how this will play out in people's lives.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes this deep dive so valuable.
It is.
It's not just about memorizing facts,
It's about thinking critically,
analyzing information,
developing your ethical awareness,
all the things you need to be a good policymaker.
and a good leader.
It's not just about passing exams.
It's about shaping the future.
Welcome back to our deep dive, everybody. Let's wrap things up by looking at the key takeaways from this Immigration and Foreigners Bill of 2025,
Yeah.
especially for all you UPSC aspirants out there.
Yeah, it's really important to remember that this bill is a major turning point for how India deals with immigration.
Yeah.
It's all about stricter rules, tougher enforcement, and more control from the central government.
It's like India is really trying to shape its future when it comes to its people. We're seeing a big push to control who comes into the country, who gets to stay, and a clear signal that everyone has to follow the rules.
Absolutely. And whether you agree with this approach or not, it's really important to understand the reasons behind it and what the consequences might be, especially for those UPSC exams.
Remember, the UPSC doesn't care about your personal opinion. They want to see if you can analyze a complicated issue, understand different points of view, and then present a solid argument based on evidence.
Right. And this bill is like a goldmine for that kind of thinking.
So just to recap, the Immigration and Foreigners Bill of 2025 brings in tougher penalties for anyone who breaks the rules. It puts more responsibility on universities and hospitals.
Hmm.
It completely changes the visa and passport system, gives more power to immigration officers, and really pushes for international cooperation.
Right. It's a big package of changes, all meant to bring India's immigration system into the 21st century.
But it definitely has its critics. We've talked about the worries about human rights violations, the extra burden on institutions, how hard it's going to be to implement all these changes, and the potential for unintended consequences.
Yeah, there are a lot of things to think about.
Now, before we sign off, I want to leave you with something to really ponder as you continue studying for your UPSC exams and as you think about India's place in the world.
Okay, I like this.
Fast forward 10 years from now, how do you think this new law will have shaped India's relationship with the rest of the world? Especially in this age of globalization where everything is so interconnected.
It's a great question.
Will it make India more attractive globally, bring in more investment, and encourage cultural exchange?
Mm.
Or could it create barriers, lead to more tensions, and make India seem less welcoming to the outside world?
Those are the big questions the UPSC loves to ask.
And there are no easy answers.
It requires really deep analysis.
You have to look at domestic policies and understand global trends.
That's the kind of thinking that will help you become great policymakers and leaders.
And remember, your UPSC journey doesn't end here.
Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep working to make a difference.
To learn more about this Immigration and Foreigners Bills 2025, make sure you check out that great article in the Indian Express. It's where we got all our information for this deep dive.
It's a good one.
And tell us what you think. What parts of this bill really stand out to you? What questions do you have? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
Your feedback helps us make these deep dives even better for everyone who's studying for the UPSC exams.
If you found this deep dive helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more discussions on important UPSC topics.
We'll see you next time.
Good luck with your UPSC preparation.